right, good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's enjoying the day here. Hope you enjoyed the keynote speech and had a good lunch. And now we're back here to learn a little bit more about GovCloud. My name's Dave Cruley, and I see a few familiar faces in here from this morning, but for those that weren't here, I'm the Solutions Architect Manager for the GovCloud team. And with me today, I have two of the members of my team, Shwetha, Anand, and Jason Shaffer. And as Jennifer indicated, we're going to talk a little bit about expanding your footprint into GovCloud, either from an on-premise environment or from an AWS region. So we're going to go through that, and hopefully this content will be so awesome that we will save you from your after-lunch food coma. But it's a high bar, but we're going to do our best to do that for you. So anyway, so here's the agenda. I'm going to kick things off. So for those of you who have seen a GovCloud presentation before, the first couple minutes here are going to be reviews, so you can kind of tune out for a minute. But if you haven't, I'm going to go into a little bit about what is GovCloud, how is it different, why would you use it, and then once I go through that, I'm going to hand things off to Shwetha, who's going to come up and talk to you a little bit about the networking aspects of GovCloud. So how do you get connected to GovCloud from either your on-premise environment or from an AWS region? How does all that work? How is it different? How is it the same as what you do in the commercial regions? And then after that, Jason's going to come up and he's going to talk to you a little bit about how. So once you decided you want to use GovCloud, you got your connectivity established. How do I actually get my stuff from the commercial regions into GovCloud or from my on-premise data center? How do I get that moved in? What are the options? What are the tools and techniques available? Pros and cons for different approaches, that sort of thing. So, and then after that, we should have a few minutes for Q&A. Okay, so GovCloud. So GovCloud is an AWS region, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a minute, but it's an isolated region that was set up for governments or customers that have very strict regulatory and compliance requirements. So that's what GovCloud was created for. It was launched, as it says, in August 2011, and it was originally set up for customers that had ITAR requirements, International Traffic in Arms Regulation, which pretty much means export controlled data. So data's got to stay inside the U.S. So one of the main customers that was the driving force behind that was the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and they approached AWS and said, hey, we really like this cloud thing. We got a lot of good use cases for it, but we have this compliance problem. With your standard, with the regions that you have, with the infrastructure you have, we can't meet that bar. So we got this ITAR problem. Can you help us out with that? And so we said, yeah, sure, we can totally help you out with that. And then the next thing was probably like pulling out your phone and going, what is ITAR? So anyway, so we did. So we set up this region and we launched it back in 2011 for customers that had these kind of requirements. And so then over the last 7 years, it's grown, and we've added a lot more, a lot of additional compliance requirements to the platform. So now we can comply with the big ones that you usually see in GovCloud are FedRAMP, ITAR, DoD Security Requirements Guide, and CGIS, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But you can also do things like if you've worked with the other Amazon standard regions, if you're doing things like HIPAA, SOC, PCI, those kinds of things, you can do those in GovCloud too. So it just kind of depends on what your needs are. So this is what our global infrastructure footprint looks like, and as you can see in the up in the top left of the screen here, see top left of the screen, this is where GovCloud is. So it's a region, and in Amazon vernacular, a region is just an area, a geographic area where we locate our resources, our data centers, compute, storage, networking resources. And inside those regions, you see a little number 3 there, and that indicates the number of availability zones that are in there. And an availability zone is how we do fault tolerance within a region. So each availability zone has its own power source, its own tier 1 internet service providers. It's got its own power source as much as we can, get that isolated. that sort of thing. But the size of a region's roughly 100 miles diameter in that circle. So we try to keep things inside that kind of a footprint because it makes things very low latency. So we get a lot of the good things you'd want out of a disaster recovery kind of a scenario. You can use multiple availability zones, but you're still close enough together that it's very low latency, so a couple of milliseconds. So you can do things like synchronous data replication and that sort of thing. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. And so inside those availability zones, we have one or more data centers in each one, and that's kind of how our footprint works. So right now, in today's statement, there is one GovCloud region. It is in, as I said, it's in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. Has 3 availability zones, but we announced a second one, a GovCloud East, and that is coming in the second half of this year, probably in Q4. We have a second region for a couple of reasons. One is if you don't happen to be on the West Coast, all your traffic going back and forth cross country, that's not suboptimal, right? And also, when I described what a region and availability zone, all that kind of stuff was, that's good from a durability and an isolation standpoint, but many customers have a requirement that says, yeah, okay, that's all good, but I need 500 miles. And if you don't give me 500 miles, that doesn't help me. I need 2 of those. I need 2 of those. So GovCloud East will then work with GovCloud as a pair, and you'll be able to do things like, do the things that you do in our normal commercial standard regions, like copying. You can copy machine images, simple storage service, copy S3 buckets back and forth between the regions and that sort of thing. So you can use one as a prod and one as a failover, or you could have a deployment that actually uses both regions at the same time. So all that will be available to you too, and that's coming in the second half of this year. So why would you need to use GovCloud? So that's a question on people's minds. Do I have to use it? There's oftentimes people say, well, if I'm a government entity, I have to use it, and that's not really true. And also, if I'm not a government entity, the name would imply I can't use it, and that's also not true. So why would you use it? There are typically the reason why you would want to use it is for compliance reasons. That's typically the reason most people are in GovCloud. So as I said, the big ones that you will get that people use the region for are FedRAMP High. If you need to do FedRAMP Moderate, you can actually do that in GovCloud or in our standard regions. DoD SRG level impact levels 4 and 5. If you need to do impact level 2, you can do that either place. CJIS, that's Criminal Justice Information Systems. That one is unique to GovCloud. ITAR, which I talked about a little bit, that is also unique to GovCloud and DFARS. So if DFARS is a requirement of your customers working like the aerospace and defense industry, you may run into that. So all of those, if you're using any of those, then GovCloud is your place. You can't do those anyplace else. If you're doing any of the others, then you got a choice. And so why else would you pick GovCloud? There's a few other distinguishing characteristics that tend to be attractive to some of our customers. I talked about right at the beginning, it's an isolated region. I didn't say air-gapped, it's isolated. So you can actually get to it from the internet and that sort of thing. So it's not completely air-gapped from the world, but it is isolated in the fact that it has its own separate availability zones. It's got its own, all the compute and networking in there is isolated from the rest of our regions. And also, it's a separate account and a separate set of credentials. So when you get a GovCloud account, you don't just sign up for a GovCloud account and get one like you do in the standard regions. You first get a standard account, and then you request a GovCloud account that gets linked to that, and we'll vet you as an account holder. So as it says it's a vetted community cloud. So the requirements for being in there are you have to be the entity requesting the credentials has to be a U.S. entity on U.S. soil. So if it's a foreign company, as long as they have a wholly owned U.S. subsidiary that's separate and distinct, they can still do that. They have to be, the root account holder has to be a U.S. person, meaning a citizen or a green card holder. And then we will also then bounce both the entity that's requesting the keys and the person against the State Department's list of people that are barred from handling export control data. So if you meet those 3 requirements, you're good. You can, we'll grant you the account. So that's why I said it's not just government customers in there. We have aerospace and defense customers that have to comply with ITAR. We have research organizations working on sensitive data. We've got software as a service provider, so there are commercial entities in there, state and local governments. So that's the there's a pretty broad constituency of customers in there. And then from our side of house, we actually, it's managed by US citizens on US soil. So that means the folks working in the data centers, the service teams, so the people that deploy, Elastic Compute Cloud or relational database service, simple storage service, all the service teams we have that are actually building and maintaining our services in the region have to be US citizens, and also any tech support personnel that that have to work with you on, if they actually have to look at your account or get in region. Like if you filed a support case, if any of you have worked in GovCloud before and you've submitted a support case, you know that a lot of questions can be answered by anybody. You don't have to be a GovCloud specialist to answer, like how do I launch an EC2 instance or how do I attach a network interface? It's the same. Operationally, the regions are very similar. So a lot of those things can be handled by anybody, but if you have a problem that requires actually somebody to actually look at your data or look at your account or go in region, then your ticket will have to get routed to an engineer on US soil to help you, a US citizen on US soil. So those are the other distinguishing characteristics that GovCloud has. So some people just feel better about the fact that it's a vetted community environment. It's all US citizens. They have a requirement for that. So it's either usually the compliance or this that usually drives it. And these features out here are actually what drives a lot of the special compliance requirements that we're able to achieve in GovCloud is the stuff I've just discussed. So that's really why people would come into the region typically. So once you've decided, okay, GovCloud is the answer, I need to expand my footprint into there. Now you got two things that you got to figure out. The first one is, okay, so how do I get connected to it? So before I can actually do anything interesting in there, I actually have to get connected to it. For most customers, hybrid cloud is absolutely the norm. And so they're going to have stuff in your data center, and you're going to have stuff in the cloud, which means you're going to have connectivity between those. And if there's a lot of communication between those two environments, you're going to need really good connectivity between those two to get steady performance, low latency, that sort of thing. So what are the networking options to do that? And that's what Shwetha is going to talk about. And then once you get that set up, so in GovCloud, now I got my, I've kind of paved the path in there. I now have a route to get into the region. Then it's like, how do I get my stuff in there? So, depending on what you're moving, we have a set of tools. We have partners that have tools. And Jason is going to tell you all about that after Shwetha. So I guess with that, I am now going to hand the mic over to Shwetha, and she is going to come up here and talk to you a little bit about how to do networking in GovCloud.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shwetha Anand, a senior solutions architect on the GovCloud team. Today, I'll be covering a few topics around the connectivity options to your GovCloud workloads, as well as the new feature announcements that we've made around VPN and Direct Connect in the GovCloud region. Let's get started then. So when we talk about networking within AWS, everything ultimately comes down to two primary connectivity options: a VPN connection, a Direct Connect connection. So let's assume you have a VPC set up with a 172.16/16 network. You have your on-premises set up with a 10.0/16 network. How would you establish connectivity between both these networks? One of the ways would be to set up a VPN connection, attach a virtual private gateway to your VPC. That's going to be the terminating endpoints of your VPN tunnels on the AWS side, and communicate back to your on-premises over this virtual private gateway and the VPN connection. Another way of doing it would be to set up a Direct Connect connection, attach a virtual private gateway, as discussed earlier, to your VPC, communicate back to your on-premises over this direct connection and the virtual private gateway attached to your VPC. So let's talk a little bit about each of these options in more detail. So if you currently have an AWS VPN solution set up in your environment, it's either going to be a classic VPN solution or the new AWS VPN solution. Before we get into what's new and what's different with the new AWS VPN solution, let's quickly recap what the classic VPN solution is about. So just like in any other standard AWS regions, you could set up IPsec VPN tunnels between your GovCloud region and your on-premises environment. These IPsec tunnels are going to be hardware-based VPN connections, and and each time you set up a VPN connection, there's essentially 2 IPsec VPN tunnels terminating to the AWS endpoints. And these AWS endpoints run on FIPS validated hardware on the AWS side. With that, let's also see how you would connect your GovCloud VPCs to your non-GovCloud VPCs in the other standard AWS regions. GovCloud cross-region VPC peering is disabled by default within the GovCloud region. However, customers can still establish connectivity between their GovCloud VPC and their non-GovCloud VPC in the other standard region by setting up a software-based VPN solution. What you essentially do is set up a virtual VPN appliance on an EC2 instance and use this instance as a terminating endpoint for your VPN tunnels within the VPC environment. One point to note here is when you open up this communication between a GovCloud VPC and a non-GovCloud VPC, always remember to enforce the required policies to prevent sensitive data from leaving the GovCloud region. And additionally, if you have multiple VPCs within your GovCloud region that you want to connect, if you want to connect multiple VPCs within your GovCloud region, you can still make use of VPC peering to connect these VPCs, but still within the GovCloud region. So with that, let's move on to the new AWS VPN solution. So up until recently, until the new AWS VPN solution was launched, each time a customer created a VPN connection, AWS pre-allocated the tunnel IP addresses as well as the pre-shared key for each of the VPN connections. The tunnel IP addressing is usually in the 169.254.255/30 address range. But with the new VPN connection, what's different is that, as you can see on in the figure there, each time you create a new VPN connection, along with the ability to create the customer gateway, setting up the routing policies, you also get an option to define your tunnel IP addressing as well as a pre-shared key for each of the IPsec tunnels. So you must be wondering, how would this benefit your architecture? So the new VPN solution provides customers a higher scalability and flexibility within their AWS VPN environment. And how it does that is, if customers want to spin up multiple VPN connections from their on-premises environment to the customer VPC environment, with the classic VPN connectivity, what used to happen is the tunnel IP, they used to receive an address clash every nth tunnel. That is the 169.254 used to repeat after a few tunnels. But with the new VPN connection, since you have the ability to define your tunnel IP addressing, that issue will no longer occur. Along with that, with the classic VPN connectivity option, if you create a VPN connection using the public IP address on your customer gateway device, you are no longer able to reuse that customer gateway public IP address to create another tunnel to the GovCloud region. However, with the new VPN solution, that is no longer going to be an issue. So you can reuse the customer gateway public IP address to create multiple tunnels to your GovCloud environment. And in addition, the new VPN solution is a FIPS compliant solution. So with that, if you want to migrate to the new VPN solution, it's just a few simple steps away. So let's start with the assumption that this is your existing VPN connection. The next step would be to create a new virtual private gateway and an AWS VPN connection. You then detach your old virtual private gateway from your Amazon VPC. You then attach the new virtual private gateway to your VPC. And then finally, enable the new tunnels on your customer gateway device. So at this point, make sure the new tunnels on your device are up and running. Your routing policies, either static or BGP, whatever you work with, are all in good shape. And then only at that point, disable and delete the old tunnels from your customer gateway device, as well as from the AWS console. So it's as simple as that. So with that, let's move on to the other connectivity option that we briefly discussed earlier, the AWS Direct Connect connection. So what is AWS Direct Connect? It is clearly a dedicated private connection into your AWS environment. Direct Connect gives you an ability to create public virtual interfaces as well as private virtual interfaces on a single Direct Connect connection. Public virtual interfaces, as the name indicates, lets you connect to the public side of the AWS network. So every service that has a public endpoint, like S3, DynamoDB, RDS, think of any service with a public endpoint, that's reachable over this public virtual interface. A private virtual interface, as the name again indicates, lets you connect to the private resources sitting in the VPC. And with this Direct Connect, there are a couple of ways that you can connect to your GovCloud region. Firstly, if you already have an existing Direct Connect in any of the other standard AWS regions, you could reuse that connection, set up a public virtual interface, create an IPsec VPN tunnel over that public virtual interface, write the AWS backbone network, and connect back to your GovCloud region. It's a two-step process, right? The second option would be via the private virtual interface. And for this to work, you have to log into your GovCloud management console and request the connection to be in the Equinix San Jose co-location facility. This gives you the ability to create a private virtual interface and then connect you directly into your GovCloud VPCs. The third and the newest, this is the newest feature that we announced a couple of months back, called the Direct Connect Gateway. Direct Connect Gateway is a global resource, and it works with the private virtual interface. This is going to be an enhancement to the first option that we discussed. You could reuse an existing Direct Connect connection to connect back to your GovCloud region. Direct Connect Gateway works with private virtual interfaces, and you can attach multiple private virtual interfaces to a single Direct Connect gateway. So what that means is, if you have an existing Direct Connect connection, you can set up a Direct Connect gateway and attach the private virtual interface and connect back to your GovCloud region. But for this to work in GovCloud, the only requirement is that the GovCloud account should be mapped to the standard account that has your Direct Connect connection. While using Direct Connect Gateway, there are a few disallowed data paths that you have to keep in mind. So for example, if you have a private virtual interface connected to a VPC A, if you have another private virtual interface connected to another VPC B, you cannot use the Direct Connect Gateway to act as a transitive routing path between private virtual interface A to private virtual interface B. So what I mean by this is, Direct Connect Gateway cannot act as a transitive route entity between two similar AWS entities. Essentially, Direct Connect Gateway helps you to connect your on-premises resources to an AWS resource, rather than helping you connect from an AWS resource to an AWS resource. Similarly, you cannot use Direct Connect Gateway to connect between a virtual private gateway attached to one VPC to a virtual private gateway attached to another VPC. So the transitive routing between both these virtual private gateway cannot be done. Finally, suppose you have a private virtual interface connected to a VPC. You also have a VPN connection terminating to that VPC. You cannot use the Direct Connect Gateway that's attached to act as a transit path for traffic going in the private virtual interface and going out the VPN connection. So that is not an allowed path either. So with that, just a few quick points that we discussed about Direct Connect Gateway. Direct Connect Gateway has the same feature set as in the commercial regions. You can use the Direct Connect Gateway from any of our Direct Connect locations, like we discussed. Direct Connect Gateway is supported between an AWS GovCloud account and a linked commercial account. From your GovCloud account, you can associate a virtual private gateway with an AWS Direct Connect Gateway that's in the linked account. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jason for him to cover the migration techniques into the GovCloud region.
Thanks, Shwetha. All right, to start out, let's get a little information back from you guys. How many people here have a GovCloud account today? Raise it. Okay. How many of you have done a migration from somewhere else to GovCloud? Okay, we've got a couple here. So good. So you know that it's been an evolving process for us. It's not something that has just been, day one. Because as Dave mentioned, this is an isolated region, right? So our credentials and our identity does not work across from the standard regions. So today, what we're going to talk about to start for the migration portion is where you're coming from. Everyone, we know destination is GovCloud, but we need to establish where our origin is first, right, to get this journey going. Next thing we need to focus on is what are we migrating? Not all data is created equal, so we need to transport it and do it different ways. Next, once we know what we're migrating, what's the volume of that, right? It's a lot easier to move a terabyte than it is a petabyte, and it means different tools to be able to make that happen. So after we have these different things nailed down, we can start looking at what mechanisms and tools that we can use to help migrate from one place to the other. And then what about your scenario, right? It's not just about these tools, it's really about how do we start mapping this together that's in a meaningful way for you guys to be able to make something somewhere else and then bring it to GovCloud. So where we want to start is there's three origins you're going to generally come from. First, you guys have been developing on-premise or running your workloads there, and then we're going to need to get that into GovCloud. Sometimes people do DevOps in our standard regions, right, because of the tools there, or maybe that's where they've started out at, and that's going to be our origin, and we need to come from there. Maybe it's another cloud platform. Maybe you've worked something on a different cloud platform and it didn't work out, and now you're moving to GovCloud. So I was just talking with customers today about how they're making this particular migration. So after we've established where our origin is, we need to understand what we're moving. So databases are a lot different than server images. So databases are something at the application layer that we need connectivity to be able to migrate. Servers, that's where we're getting the OS, the platform, the application, all at once. So that takes a different type of tool to be able to move that. And then same thing with application data. If we're taking some buckets from standard and moving it into GovCloud, there's some things that we need in tools that are going to be different than moving servers, right? So we need to make sure and understand what we're migrating before we start a process. So which tools are available to us? So let's start with VM import-export. So this particular tool, it does not have a GUI interface. So in fact, how many people here have used VMware import-export? Right? It's a tool that you have to know what you're doing and have a lot of intention at first before you get into it, right? So it could be coming from different places. It could be coming from AWS. We can be pulling a raw image off of a snapshot. It could be coming from on-premise in the form of a VDMK. But we're going to have to put this inside of a GovCloud S3 bucket. And once we put it inside there, we're going to have to start running some command line tools. Now, this is focused on being able to get to a CLI that has access into GovCloud. And then you're going to state the OS, you're going to give the key and value in the bucket for it to be able to find the service. There's actually some things you need to do with roles to be able to set this up first, but we have a great document online that you can go through and follow and do all the steps. But this tool allows you, from a CLI perspective, to bring 1, 2, 3 images at a time. So this is something we need to think about how it may fit into our overall strategy. If we're doing CLI, that means we're probably not going to scale very large. But it can be scripted if you're looking for that. Our next tool that we're looking for is server migration service. So how many people here use vSphere or VMware on-premise today? So there's a good number of you. And then for Hyper-V? Okay. So what this tool is for you guys is if you're running that, this is an image that you would put inside, and we take a catalog of what you have inside your on-premise data center. And then we can start representing that inside of our AWS Server Migration Console. And now we can start going 1, 2, 3, 4. We can actually move images a little bit more quickly than we just mentioned before. The VM import exports a CLI. Well, this provides us a GUI to be able to do this process and a little more at scale. So it's a little bit different, but yet it's still based on similar type of idea of importing an image. So those are images. Next we want to focus on is the databases. So Database Migration Service has done, I believe, 50 or 60,000 different databases migrations. So this is a really nice tool to be able to pretty much grab anywhere and push into AWS GovCloud. So we can be on-premise, we can be in AWS Standard, or on another cloud provider. And you can see a sampling of the data, or excuse me, of the particular types of databases. There's not inclusive here, but I just wanted to show some of the popular ones that we do quite often. So for instance, if we need to get, say, a MySQL database, DMS just needs to be able to get to the IP address of the server, port 3306, and we can extract that data out. Now what we'll do is we'll take that from the left-hand side and we're going to push it to the right. And again, I'm not giving an inclusive list on the right, but I'm just trying to show you examples of what we could be doing. We could be pulling something from Oracle and putting into Redshift. MySQL, we could be putting it into RDS, which we have like Aurora, MariaDB. We could even put it into an EC2, right? So if you guys wanted to own your own OS and own the application as well, you guys can still use DMS to be able to migrate that database. So a lot of flexible options for you. So you can see you could run jobs in parallel. So this is a pretty scalable tool on being able to migrate large amounts of database type information. Again, you can see why we have different tools for different types of data. So Snowball, we need to talk about application data. So this gives us a pretty highly scalable way to do 100 terabits at a time by just going to the console. We state that we need X number of snowballs, right? We connect those snowballs to our network. We upload a manifest, so we have the ability to have it go grab the information. When it synchronizes, it gives you a notification that that synchronization is done. We put a little UPC code on the front that you can give to ship it off. At that point, we're going to go back to the data center, plug it in, and transfer that copy to the data to an S3 bucket. Now, once that's there, we're going to notify you again when that data is complete. So that gives you kind of a little life cycle of how we can move large-scale application-based data from on-premise. Now, there is a caveat that I will give on this as well, too. If we were going from standard region to GovCloud region, this does require an extra snowball, right? Because those are two separate services and how they're registered. So we'll talk maybe a little bit more about that on the matrix when we're coming up with what we may need for this migration. Now, this last one's a little bit more near and dear to my heart. When I came into Amazon, one of the first things that Dave, my manager, asked me, he's like, hey, I need you to see about taking images and app data from GovCloud, from our standard regions into GovCloud. It's been a real big issue with people not being able to have something that's similar to US West and US East, where you just say, hey, global replication in my S3, and it's done, right? So what we did is we went through and we understood the problem a little bit better, and we went through and created a script that will go through and deploy CloudFormation templates in both standard and GovCloud. And what these templates deploy for you is a set of resources that allow you to either A, from a graphical interface, or from a programmatic way, if you're wanting to use the AWS SDK, we can kick off extraction from commercial or standard regions into the GovCloud region. So the users can go to a web interface, state the AMI or snapshot ID, and they state what OS it has, or what GovCloud you're wanting to point it to, and it shows both East and West for the anticipation of our East coming online this year. And then we just state where it's sourced from, right? And once we have that, it's pretty much hands-off. It takes about anywhere between 20 minutes if it's a small image, and this can do up to 100 gigabytes per image. So it's not meant to be the end-all, be-all, but 100 gigabit images we thought was a good size for moving a application stack over. Now, at the same time, we also focused on being able to do app data, right? So the app data, we have a S3 synchronization, and now this, just like the original image I show up here, the S3 is a one-way synchronization. So we can do up to a terabit of data in, say, any S3 bucket in standard regions. We can synchronize that into GovCloud. And another thing that you can do to make it more programmatic is you can use CloudWatch, give it a little bit of snippet of JSON, right, just the source and destination, and at that point, we can have a regular interval of being able to synchronize our application data. So if you have data in standard regions and need that replicated in a certain time interval, this would be your tool right here. Now, both of these also have a way to be embedded into, say, a programmatic operation for you. If you have a practice, or maybe you have, for instance, like a development practice inside of the standard regions, what would this allow us to do? Well, when I make new AMIs, I can build this in to have an SDK call to say, hey, take this AMI ID and push it over to GovCloud, east or west. So this, if you go in the resources, I give you the GitHub page. It'll show you all the details on how to do everything. I give you sample functions to be able to write this yourself. Very simple stuff, really. It's only 3 things you need to change, as I mentioned. Source, destination, and, well, that's actually it you need for the S3. It's the image that needs 3. So this tool, available on GitHub, something that the SA team and we've developed to help the migrations. Lastly, what we want to talk about is white glove service. Everything else has been focused on something that you guys would do, right? Something you to go turn a key, something for you to go make the motions. This is focused on 2 types of partners. Ones that have created technologies focused on doing some of the things we mentioned today, from a programmatic standpoint, tools that will move your application real time over to GovCloud. Other ones are focuses around the services around it, right? So that they're the people that are going to be the services wrapper that gets you from A to B. So I don't want to say that this is inclusive by any means. These are, again, just ones we deal with a lot and that have come up, and we wanted to bring them up today to show that there's someone that you can engage to help that transition. All right. Second to last slide here. Let's talk about the matrix, because this is what really culminates everything that we just talked about over the next last 15 minutes or so. We want to be able to have you look at this and say, I need A, B, and C. So first, on the upper left-hand corner, what we have is the VMware export. So the on-prem, standard, and maybe other cloud. So if we can get extraction from, say, Azure in the form of a VHD or some other type of raw image, we can still do an import with that. But the reason why we say low volume is because of the CLI. Now, you can also do some programmatic things to bake that into a script that you guys would want to use, but there's other tools that may be there already scripted as well. So service migration service, it's not something they can grab from standard, but it can grab from on-prem. One of the nice things about this, too, to note is if you're bringing a BYOL license, this allows you to be able to export it as well, too. So you can pull it back down to on-prem as well. So that's something extra there. But it's still a medium because from our standpoint, there's manual intervention that you're clicking on every time you want something to come over. It is a little bit easier because of the graphical interface, so we want to be able to make those clicks. DMS, the database migration service, this is a pretty high one because it's so flexible. I mean, it really just needs to be able to get an IP packet to the database and be able to get to 3306 or whatever port that database is using with the right creds, and then we can extract that out. So, and you can do this in parallel. You can run multiple jobs at one time, so lots of stuff, a lot of data can be flowing at once. Snowball from on-premise. This is something obviously it's been well documented and well exposed into the media on how we can do Snowball. You can do stuff at the edge as well, or Snowball Edge, being allowed for encryption of that data while it's being put to the disk. So we have definitely some security around transporting that. GovCloud import tool. This is focused realistically from our standard regions to GovCloud. So it's not focused on bringing things from other clouds or from on-premise, right? Just from our standard regions. We have this as medium because it still has a graphical interface that you do ones and twos here and there. But it can go a little bit scale more if you put it programmatically into your DevOps flow, right? And then third-party migration services. These are white gloves, so this is where you don't have to touch anything, right? You build out your requirements, they provide the services, and they deliver you an end state. So with that, what I want to do is just tell you about the resources real quick. So each one of these, if you want to grab a snapshot in case we miss handing out, these are all the different tools and their locations on where you may find them. Specifically, for DMS, you're going to want to check that we have a whole table on being able to, if you're coming from here, you should be going to this, right? Check the documentation, it's there. As you know, we're great at documenting things, and we do plenty of it. So take a time, and then there's further instructions around the import tool. It gives a lot of details on how to go through it. At this time, I'm going to bring Dave back up, and he's going to focus on Q&A. I appreciate your time.
Okay. Okay, thanks, guys. So we have a few minutes. We'll all be over here afterwards, but we have a few minutes if there's any questions anybody has from the audience now that we can do, or we'll all be available over here afterwards. So if there's any questions, let us know. Oh, over here. Wait, you can give me a mic. I'll exercise in.
Okay. So I saw that you had West and East is coming for GovCloud. Do you have any plans for Central? North and South Central? So you have 4 locations instead of 2?
In today's statement, we have plans for a GovCloud East, so that'll give us 2. Then after that, it's driven by customer demand, right? So if the demand is there for another one, we will add another one, but that's not a small undertaking. Obviously, it takes us. We announced GovCloud East officially last year at the summit, and it takes a while to build them, right? So if there was demand for another one, we will build another one. But in the today's statement, we have that one, and that's like the chart I showed you basically had our build plan worldwide for the regions that we have coming online in the near term. So that's kind of where we are, but that's not to say we wouldn't build one. It's just if there was a need and customer demand to do that, we drive about 90% of our roadmap off of customer requests. So we will do it if the demand and if the need were there. So. Any other questions? Oh, right here.
A challenge we've had in GovCloud is the more limited availability of services. Mm-hmm. What's your plan for addressing that and bringing GovCloud, bringing to GovCloud some of the services that are available in the other regions? Yeah, so that has historically been a challenge for us, and a couple things have happened. One of the reasons we had blockers with deploying a lot of our services is we talked about availability zones earlier. GovCloud was originally built with 2 availability zones. A lot of our services, especially the new ones, require 3. So until we deployed the 3rd availability zone in, I want to say it's like February, March timeframe this year. It's been recent anyway. And so it's that unblocked a lot of services for us. So if you look at our service launch schedule since that happened, the floodgate has opened. We've launched about I want to say we've launched close to a dozen services since that's happened. So that is helping us to catch up with our tech debt. And the size of the region is growing too. So with the demand for the actual demand for the newer services, we are trying to catch up with the other regions. So our stated goal for the region is to do what we would call pragmatic parity. So we want to get all the services in the region that make sense to be in the region. Given the customer constituency and the compliance requirements, not everything that we have in our standard regions even makes sense in GovCloud. But
we do have a pretty aggressive roadmap for the rest of this year and going forward to not only get the services in region, but then run them through the compliance wickets soon thereafter. I mean, our policy now is if you're going to deploy in GovCloud, we need to know what your plan is for FedRAMP and DoD, before you hit the ground, so that when we get the services in region, we can very quickly do the compliance after that. Because most of the stuff, when we deploy it in region, that has historically been a blocker too. It's like, well, we get it in there and nobody uses it because it's not compliant. It's not compliant with whatever they need in the region. So that's been a challenge. So now what we're trying to do is crunch that and speed it up so that we can get the services in your hands. So that's allowing us to focus more on services that are a priority for our customers, and we can also, get into your hands as quickly as possible. But I fully acknowledge that has been a challenge in the region in the past, and we are very aggressively trying to step up our efforts to catch up on the tech debt that we have there with respect to region launches. So I think we've already launched more this year than we did last year in the whole year, and we have plenty more on the roadmap for the rest of the year. So, yeah. Thanks.
One more over here.
Okay.
You mentioned the certification process that you've been through with the GovCloud.
Mm-hmm.
Are there certificates, or how do we get some, quote, proof of that certification?
Right. So it varies a little bit by program. Most of our compliance artifacts are actually available for self-service download through the console. There's a service in the console called Artifacts. It's actually not in the GovCloud console, but that doesn't matter. You can get it in your commercial account. They're all in there for like the FedRAMP moderate partner packages in there, the SOC, ISO, all those audits are in there. There's a few that are document controlled. So we use for like the FedRAMP and the DoD SRG. Those are digital rights managed documents, and you can request those directly from us, or you can actually request them from the FedRAMP program office, either one. So those are, but there is a link to go in and request those as well. So most of them are downloadable. A few of them you have to request directly from us though, but yeah. And if you want to know, other thing is if you want to just know, one of the questions is always, okay, well, which services are covered? If I just want to know that basic piece of information, if you go into your browser and type in AWS services in scope, you'll get a page that actually has by region which services have been audited. So against FedRAMP moderate, DoD, all that stuff. So that's all in there. So if you just need that, you can. That is available on our public website. We're here.
So what's your take on contingency planning for GovCloud?
Contingency planning, can you give me a little bit more?
So when we were talking about going FedRAMP on GovCloud High, and it always talks about like the disaster recovery and contingency planning and business continuity model. We always have to share that story that it's going to be in the same availability zone, or so now the keynote also talked about that it's going to be a different. Right now it's in West Coast, it's going to be in East Coast also. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so and I was actually kind of alluding to this. I was alluding to this in the chart where I had the global footprint up there. GovCloud today has 3 availability zones, so it's got three, kind of sliced up into 3 pieces. Each one of them have their own, a lot of the things you would look for in a DR COOP solution, different floodplains, different internet service, tier 1 internet service providers, different power sources, that kind of thing. So it gives you a lot of the goodness that you would want from a durability standpoint. However, it does have the Achilles heel of its 100-mile radius, right? So if something really catastrophic were to happen to that whole region, you could potentially have a problem. So there is I guess an open gate there from a risk perspective. So that's one of the big drivers behind GovCloud East, was to give you the ability to have a second region somewhere else in the country, so you do get that level of fault tolerance. And also then if you wanted to, you can make different decisions about which one's better for you from a latency standpoint, which one would be primary, which one would be the failover, that sort of thing. So you get some options there. So that's really what the GovCloud East was all about. Now most people have been, we've definitely had some customers who know that GovCloud East is coming, so they've kind of given us a waiver on that whole DR thing because they know it's coming. But so they have to do a little risk acceptance there. But yeah, that's one of the biggest reasons why that one's coming along, because that's there, because there is that risk there, and it's not to discount that, but that's the way it is. I mean, we don't a lot of customers actually talk about using multiple regions, but I think about 90% of our customers actually operate in one region. I mean, but we do, a lot of the folks that are in GovCloud are doing mission critical, life and death kind of things. So continuous availability is kind of a big deal for them, right? So they really do need the second region. So it is, we can't get it up there fast enough. Oh, there's one right here.
Yeah, do you have any tool for migrating from customer cloud to GovCloud to C2S?
There is a service, so the question was, is there a tool to migrate from GovCloud to C2S, correct?
Yes, yeah, GovCloud to C2S, also like a public cloud to GovCloud.
Well, okay, so public cloud to GovCloud is easy. So the utility that Jason talked about will do that for you, because typically you just can't do that out of the box with our stuff. You can write your own stuff to do it, but out of the box, we don't really support, migrating an S3 bucket into GovCloud. But Jason's utility will essentially allow you to pick assets up, whether they're machine images or data. That and DMS, that'll migrate application data, database data, and your actual servers. That can move from commercial to GovCloud. Then there is another service called Diode, which actually operates in US East today. So it can migrate. So we have folks that work in the Intel community that actually do their development in the commercial region, then they migrate it up. So it's a one-way trip in. So Diode actually allows them to migrate from a lower security classification to a higher one. So it can go from unclassified to secret or top secret. And so that service is being deployed into GovCloud this year as well. So that will solve the issue that you're talking about from going from between security classifications. But yeah, so then we'll have all the use cases covered that you talked about. But right now we still can't get from GovCloud to C2S very easily yet. But any other questions? Okay, well, that being said, thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit, and we'll be up here for a few minutes afterwards if you have any additional questions.